All right, so we've got RJ in Denver. You're on with Seth and Matt. How are you?
Hi. And I think I've talked to you before a few weeks ago. I don't know if you remember me or not.
We'll find out. I take a lot of calls, so I don't want to say I do before I do.
All right. Well, I know you've got the notes there, but basically, once again, this isn't 100% proof, but I think it definitely supports the idea of Judeo-Christianity over evolution.
I have a question, though.
The ancient... Yep.
So when you say it's not 100% proof, allow me to be kind of pedantic for a second in order to throw off the people who are watching this video and in chat who are going to be pedantic. Proof for me is a mathematical thing. Instead, when we're talking about epistemology, about how we know what we know, we don't have proof. That's math. What we have is evidence, and whether or not the evidence is sufficient to reach a conclusion. So it's not like you have to have 100% proof. What you have to have is evidence that's sufficient to reach a conclusion. And so is the evidence that you're going to be presenting sufficient to conclude that a God exists?
I would say it definitely proves that atheism or evolution doesn't exist. Because if you look at... Can I just say that I believe before we get into this philosophical argument? I just want to hear how you'd refute it.
Well, I mean, you've already... I don't want to be a dick. I'm going to let you say what you think. But you've already started off just about as awfully as you possibly could. You suggest that you have evidence for God, and then when I ask you about it, what you then say is that you think that it shows that evolution or atheism can't be correct. Well, atheism isn't a positive statement, and evolution isn't in any way necessarily excluding a God. And evolution, by means of natural selection, is the scientific cornerstone of the explanation for the diversity of life. Are you saying that you don't believe that evolution is real?
I don't. No, I don't believe in evolution.
Well, he just invoked Francis Collins, right, who actually is a Christian.
Right.
Ken Miller is an intelligent design guy who's also a credible biologist. You've got the Catholic Church, who it took them until the 1980s, but they finally embraced the fact of evolution, this idea that first of all, you've linked God belief and the science of evolution together.
Which is a mistake.
A lot of believers actually hold to evolution.
So prove evolution is false and undermine all of science. Go ahead.
Well, okay.
All biology.
The ancient civilizations, I think you would all agree, the oldest civilization is Sumeria that we know of, correct? Samaria, ancient Samaria.
I don't know, but I'll go ahead. I don't know how that... Here's the thing.
It's one of the oldest on record. I'll give him that.
I've been doing this a long time, and this is not the way that an argument is constructed. Like, genuinely, it's not like you're anywhere near a premise yet, other than to suggest, like, which ancient civilization is the oldest is irrelevant to whether or not there's a God. But go ahead.
Okay, so I know a lot of evolutionists believe that humans started in Africa, right?
Can we just call them scientists? Can we just call them scientists and not evolutionists? Because we're talking about actual scientists who are actual experts in this, who've spent their entire life doing this, and you want to evolutionists. But go ahead.
Sure. I mean, if you want to refer to them as that's. I mean, I don't.
I prefer to refer to them as realists attached to reality who aren't denying scientific facts, but you can call them whatever you want.
And I don't know that believe is necessarily the word that we find useful here. It is that it has been traced. We have traced humankind's lineage. We have traced it back to Africa. So it's not that they just woke up and said, I'm going to believe this. They actually dug into it, and they began to reverse engineer the genome and began to look at civilizations and humankind. And
do you DNA is real?
Wait. Some of them believe Australia, though. So do you believe Australia is where
That's
they
first
started,
I've heard
or do you believe Africa?
of Australia.
So can we just stop, RJ? Because It doesn't matter. The fact that we don't know where life originated, the fact that scientists have a number of different speculations about that ultimate answer, doesn't mean that what we know about science is wrong. Do you believe that DNA is real? Because I had a caller today that didn't, so I want to check that.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, and DNA is very, very complicated. It's a code. It's basically a codex. I mean, you used to be a coder, correct? Weren't you a coder for video games at one point?
It's not a code. It is analogous to a code, but it's not a code. It's not like somebody picked these out and constructed that. But you at least believe the DNA is real, then?
Well, yeah, it's a code. I mean, life when it exists without it, it's a code.
It is not. This, you saying it's a code is a dishonest way to address it. It is analogous to a code. It can appear to be a code. But when somebody like you wants to use the word code with it, you're suggesting that this means that it was designed and implemented by an agency with an intent and purpose. And that's not how it applies with science to a DNA as a code.
Okay. Well, I think I'm getting off track here with the DNA. I just wanted to go into this, and I know you're probably going to disagree with it, but I just wanted to go into the civilization part of it and finish my thought on that.
Yes,
if you don't mind.
Distracting.
Okay. Okay, so the ancient civilizations, you have Sumeria, the one that we know of, the one that's on record, right? That's right smack dab in the Middle East, where a lot of the religious, I should say, or Christianity theologians, not all of them, but some of them believe that's where the Tower of Babylon was at. And it's very close. I mean, if you look back at the Noah where he landed in Mount.
I think you mean Tower of Babel, not Tower of Babylon.
Yeah, Tower of Babel, but it became it's the Tower of Babel, but then Babylon eventually came from that same section, but that was at a later time. That's why they actually referred to it as Babylon, but anyways, that was later. You're right. You're correct. But the Tower of Babel, correct. So all those civilizations, if you look at Greece, Egypt, and Sumeria, they're all right there in the Middle East. They're not in Africa. They're not in Australia.
Okay, stop. RJ, stop. The oldest civilization, that's what we're talking about, right? The oldest civilization, right?
Oldest known civilization, I should say. Yep.
Oldest known civilization, but the key word there is civilization. Where you're not citing where did life begin, you're citing where did civilization, where did recorded history begin. Life predates recorded history. And when scientists say that life, our common ancestors for humans, seems to begin in Africa or in that vicinity, that's not saying that's where civilization began. The beginning of the existence of humans is not the same thing as the beginning of the existence of civilization.
Right, I understand that. So, wouldn't the probability be more that it would, if life began in Africa, that civilization would have started roughly like in that area versus the Middle East, if that was correct?
So, first of all, RJ, have you looked at a globe ever in your life? Do you think that the Earth is round or flat?
Yes.
Okay, so have you?
Are you going to insult me? Because yes, of course, I think it's round.
Am I going to insult you? You're sitting here suggesting that biological science isn't real, and you think I'm insulting you?
I never said that biological science wasn't real. When did I say that?
You don't accept evolution, and you're pointing to the oldest civilization that you can reference and trying to argue as if that has any bearing on where life began or the origin of human beings began. And by the way, the Middle East and Africa, not that far away. And if you were to go to like 23andMe or do some genetic research, the haplotype there would show how our best understanding of human origins begin in a part of Africa, and then how your ancestors in particular migrated. In my case, it went directly through the Middle East and then up to Europe. But the beginning of humans is not the same as the beginning of civilization. And yes, if humans began in Africa, it's not surprising that we would see civilization in the Middle East.
Right.
Okay.
And another thing is the population, and I talked about this last time. Population, the highest population is in Asia, in the continent of Asia. It's not in the continent of Africa or Australia. that would imply that
oh my God.
human life.
All right, I'm going to mute. I'm going to put you on mute, RJ. Where the largest population is today has no bearing on where human life originated. You might as well be saying that because New York has way more people than Maine, that clearly the first colonists landed right at New York and just built that there. If you're going to make the claim, all I want to know is, do you have evidence? And it says here that you have evidence for a high probability that Judeo-Christianity, which by the way, isn't a fucking thing. Judeo-Christianity, not a real fucking thing. There's Judaism, there's Christianity. And the only time that Judeo-Christian, go ask a Jew if there's Judeo-Christian. That's only used when they want to side together against somebody else. But the origin that you're talking about, do you actually have evidence for it? Not, hey, look at the oldest civilization, or look where the population is. That flies in the face of my personal confused interpretation of what science has to say about the origins of biological diversity.
Yeah, I heard a beeping noise. Am I still on the line?
I'm waiting for you to answer.
Okay. I would say that the fact that the Sumerian language is the oldest written language, I would say that is in the Middle East. Makes the probability very high that life began or started in the Middle East.
Well, you're wrong.
I mean,
you are demonstrably wrong. That is your personal suspicion, which isn't supported by evidence or understanding, and flies in the face of what scientists have seen. The reason you have that as the oldest written language and the oldest known civilization, that's because language goes along with what we define as civilized, but it doesn't go along with what we define as the origin of humans.
What about the early Sumerian religions that were not Christianity? That's what I'm wondering. All right, let's say if we followed your premise to its logical conclusion, what about the non-Christian religions, right? These sort of heathen practices, these non-Jesus, non-Yahweh religious practices linked to the Sumerians. That would make your Judeo-Christianity bogus and false. Jesus would have been a false
I knew you were going to bring that up.
Did you?
Well, I mean, I'm just curious. How would you respond if we followed your premise to its natural origin and we say, fine, everything's rooted in ancient Sumeria? Wouldn't the religions of that time and geographic region then be the accurate ones, plural, and not Judeo-Christianity, which came thousands of years later?
No. When Noah landed in Mount Ararat, which was north,
I'm done.
It's kind of northern Syria, right?
Hands are up. My hands are up.
Okay, I'm not saying, I know you don't believe in the Bible, but if you follow the actual stories.
RJ, you're now muted, and you're muted because my co-host said that he's done with you.
I mean, I don't.
He asked you about the logical conclusion of your argument, and what you came back was when Noah landed on Mount Ararat. First of all, you have no evidence that Noah existed or created a boat or that there was a global flood or that he landed on Mount Ararat or that anybody,
He just invoked like the most easily refuted story, arguably, in the Christian Bible.
But is that surprising? For somebody who wants to, who thinks, somebody sitting there, armchair, deciding, confused about the difference between the origin of life, the origin of humanity, and the origin of civilization, thinking that he has evidence for a God, and then when faced with the logic that exposes that, well, of course we're going to go to Noah. RJ, you're not going to convince us by citing Bible stories. You need to come with evidence.
I produced a video.
Am I still online, or did you? I didn't hear the.
I was waiting for you to say goodbye.
I have one more thing. I want to say.
No, I was waiting for you to say goodbye.
Oh, okay. So
goodbye.
All right. I produced a video years ago. It's called Noah's Ark, God, Giraffes, and Genocide. in about 4 minutes, just dissects the Noah story. Now, this is a digression from his original question, but he brings up Noah. I'm like, of all of the stories, like some of the shit in the Bible, we can be like, well, did it happen? Did that region do this or that? Well, maybe. And then somebody sort of bastardized it and did something else with it and molded it and magicked it and did all those things, magicked. That's not even a word. And
I'm with it. That's a word.
Noah's Ark. So anyway, you can look that up on YouTube. But he said something else, and it brought up something I wanted to toss out. He mentioned the Tower of Babel. I produced, I think it was earlier this year, a short form audio vignette podcast. It's called The Tower That Reaches the Heavens. And it got into the story of the Tower of Babel, right? Prideful humankinds built the tower because they wanted to become God, essentially. They were reaching up into the heavens. And so they, using these primitive materials, primitive techniques, built this tower. And God got so pissed off that he punished the people by splintering them into languages that could not be understood. And then they all flew out. And so that's supposed to explain the various languages of planet Earth. But I was thinking to myself, that story makes no sense. When he brought it up, I wanted to jump into that because I think the tallest buildings of the modern day so eclipse anything that the Tower of Babel might have ever been. If you go to Dubai or if you go to Kuala Lumpur, if you go to, hell, you look at One World Tower and you look at the sheer height and girth and monumental amazingness of these structures, far eclipse anything that angered God in the Old Testament whenever the people were building Babel. And yet we've heard not one peep, not one syllable of protest from Yahweh over our hugely taller and more magnificent man-made structures in the 20th and 21st centuries. I just thought that was interesting.
So you and I are going to disagree.
Oh, shit. What'd I say?
Just a little bit, because I've also done a video about the Tower of Babel. And I would have agreed with you and thought, and it would have agreed with everything you said for the entirety of my time as a Christian, even having read it, until I actually read it and focused on it. Because the truth about the Tower of Babel story, and it's only 9 verses. I mean, it's Genesis 11, the first 9 verses, I think. And if you read it, actually, let me pull it up. Let me go to BibleGate.
You don't have to read it to me. I'll take it on faith. I mean,
oh my God.
I believe it's true. You don't have to.
So Genesis 11.
I'm being corrected on live television.
No, it's not corrected. Well,
if I'm wrong about the context or the text itself, I definitely want to know. So tell me where you're at.
At no point does it suggest that they were trying to build a tower to reach heaven or to reach God. At no point does it say God was in any way concerned or mad about the tower or concerned that it could reach heaven, which would be preposterous anyway. What it says is, in verse 1, now the whole earth used the same language and the same words. Cool. We know that's bullshit already. So this whole story is done from the beginning. We know enough about linguistics to know that that's not the case. But verse 2, it came about as they journeyed east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. Okay. Then they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they used bricks for stone and they used tar for mortar. Now, first of all, we're talking about a brick construction. So I'm sure we'll get engineers letting us know what can and can't be done.
What height and girth you could support. Sure.
And they said, come, let us build a city, build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into heaven. And let us make for ourselves a name. Otherwise, we will be scattered abroad across the face of the whole earth. And then we get to the crux of this. In verse 5, it says, the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. The Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they all have the same language. And this is what they begin to do. And now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down there and confuse their language so that they will not be able to understand one another's speech. In verses 5, 6, and 7, God comes down and says, hang on, these people are working together. They are communicating, they are working together, they want to stay together as a community, and if they keep doing this, there is nothing that they will be unable to accomplish. That is a direct paraphrase. And this is what they begin to do. And now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confound their language so that they will not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore, it was named Babel, because the Lord confused the language. But the truth of the matter is that story is about a group of people who were advocating for communication, cooperation, and principles of humanism. And God came down and said, if this shit keeps going, they're going to be able to do anything, and we can't have that.
But you just validated my position that God it caused him great chagrin, which is why he confused the people and scattered them to the wind.
Right. Not because they were going to build a tower to heaven, though, but because they were cooperating and they would have no more need of God.
I buy that. I mean, I should have been clearer. I think I see the two tight. It's a cooperative endeavor, but you're right. It was more about the attitudes of the people and the idea that they could produce these amazing results without divine intervention. God was not pleased. But
can you imagine what would happen if they were building a spaceship?
Yeah, we have breached the end of the solar system, and yet Yahweh has not lifted he's not shown up and said, hey, wait a minute. This kind of cooperation ain't working for me. The International Space Station, right? Talk about global cooperation. Yahweh has not once said, hey, hang on, you can't do that. Like,
hey, Google Translate, motherfucker.
What was the term that you used?
And we
earlier?
beat that too. What's that?
You used a term with a caller. You called it Google foo.
Google foo, yes. Your ability to type the correct phrases into a search engine to get the results that you're looking for.
There's also another, for the snarky people in the audience, if there's ever someone who is not able to procure the most basic of information and you want to make a point, there's a website called Let Me Google That For You. And you can go to that website and type in whatever the subject is, and then you can send your friend or family member that link, and it pops up and says, hey, let me Google that for you. And then it takes them to whatever the subject matter is. It's not for everybody, but if you're a little snarky, you might enjoy it.
I've done it.